Ducks fans, are you ready? You are listening to the Ducks and Pucks podcast with your hosts, Mike Walters and Eddie Jones. This is the number one home for Anaheim Ducks talk and analysis. Here we go.
All right, welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Mike Walters, along with my co-host, Eddie Jones. We took a week off. Eddie and I both went out of town for the past week, and now we're back to get you caught up on some of the action. Obviously, there hasn't been as much going on in relation to the Ducks in the last 2 weeks, but there's been some other news as far as some of the coaching news around the league. We have some of the hockey tournament news to talk about, and of course, the Stanley Cup with Pittsburgh squaring off with the San Jose Sharks. But we'll get to the Ducks first here with some coaching news. A little bit came up today, Eddie. The name Randy Carlyle came back up, and it appears, according to TSN, that it looks like the Ducks are going to interview Randy Carlyle, and it's expected to happen today.
I guess I'm not really surprised. I mean, you mentioned him before in a couple articles, and we talked about it on some other podcasts too, about him possibly coming back, and he was the number one vote in the poll that we put on too, of people of the coaches that people wanted to bring in. So it's not really a huge surprise. I mean, it's a little bit surprising that the news came out this late and that they're deciding to interview him this late into the process. I don't know how it works and how they decide to interview who they want first or last. But I don't know how I really feel about this. I mean, we saw what happened last time and how ugly I guess the ending was. When Boudreau was hired and Carlyle was fired way back when. And, he is kind of the kicking in your pants kind of coach. And, that might be what the Ducks need right now. But, do you want to risk possibly the relationship that him and Perry and Getzlaf have might still be a negative one? I'm not too sure how that's going to work.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest issue, Eddie, that you mentioned amongst all the fans when articles come out on Randy Carlyle and we post them. That's the number one comment or number one question I get is him being a recycled coach. Obviously, some people say yes because he led the Ducks to the Stanley Cup, and then other people point to him not getting along with Perry and Getzlaf, which is what you mentioned and I mentioned too. And I believe the last maybe 2 or 3 podcasts we've kind of talked about this now. And I think that is the issue that the Ducks are going to have to figure out if they did do the interview today, which they said that they would. I'm sure that issue came up. And I don't know where it stands with Perry and Getzlaf in the relationship with him. Obviously, when he left, it wasn't that great. The team is completely different now, as we've talked about. There's only a couple other players left from back then. So maybe things have changed enough to bring him back. I'm not really a fan of recycling coaches. That's never been my thing. As far as the process goes too, Eddie, I think you mentioned this last podcast. The Ducks may be taking time. I mean, we saw the San Jose Sharks knock out the St. Louis Blues. We remember Hitchcock was mentioned. Now we hear that he's already got a deal locked in for another year with St. Louis, and he's saying that might be his last year, so you can take him off of the table. And we saw Pittsburgh take out Tampa Bay, and obviously nothing's, at least that we've heard, is going to happen with their coaching staff. So I think it's getting down to the wire here. I really don't see too many other options. The only other one that came up, which was a couple days ago, and you really know this one pretty well because it's basically in your backyard, is Dale Hunter with the London Knights. So what do you think about him as another option?
I think if he actually wanted to come back to the NHL, he would be a great option. He's a similar type of coach in a way to Randy Carlyle. He's a stricter coach in his approach to how he deals with his players. The one time he did come into the NHL, it didn't really work out for him, and he didn't get fired from the Washington Capitals. He actually just decided to leave. He didn't really, he just didn't really enjoy the whole NHL coaching experience from what I've read and what I've looked up. And he's been with the London Knights for so long. Him and his family they own the London Knights, so I think his ties with there are just too strong, and that's why he ended up going back and obviously winning the Memorial Cup this year, which is the second in London's history. It'd be hard to see him leave, but I think he would be a good option if he wanted to come back, and the Ducks were looking in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, I think he kind of has some of the similar characteristics. If you're looking at Randy Carlyle as well, he's been known to be tough on the players. He's was tough on Ovechkin. one of those games in that 2011-2012 postseason. He only played in 14 minutes. He's really big on team defense, and he doesn't like when players, don't back check as much, especially the star players that, only play offense as much, which, that's been a criticism of Ovechkin, over the seasons as well. That's also kind of been a criticism of Corey Perry as well. So, the big issue is if he'd want to do it, which, like you said, I really don't think he would want to do it, but I don't think he's that bad of a choice. His record, and I know it's not the NHL, but his record is 641 wins, 254 losses, and then 65 either ties or overtime losses. That's how they still do it in the OHL. The NHL only does just the one category. But he's a quality player. He's no nonsense when he played. He does the same kind of work ethic and team play as a coach as well, Eddie. But I think you're right. I think he's going to stay over in your backyard, basically, because, as you said, he's co-owner of the team.
Yeah, it would be great, like I said already, but with that win record and with all the ties he has with London and the team, and they're still going to have a good team next year. They always seem to ice a pretty good team year after year, and as much as we like to see another name thrown into this mix of names we've already seen been thrown out there, I think you can't really scratch him off. But from all the reports that I've read, it doesn't seem like he's interested to come back to the NHL, at least at this point in his career.
And this kind of leads us to an interesting fan question we had. We were going to do the podcast last week, but we decided to hold off. And one of the fans asked us, what would you, referring to you, Eddie, and me, do as far as if we were the GM and, picking this coaching situation and whatnot? If you look at the choices that are out there, the ones that we at least know that are out there, you have Randy Carlyle, obviously. We mentioned Dale Hunter as well. Before that was Luke Richardson. We heard about Mike Yeo from Minnesota, Travis Green, and then internally MacLean and Trent Yawney. So those are kind of the field that we got now, unless there's something else out there, which may come, because we all know how Murray is. He will pull out something out of the hat sometimes, and something can pop up. But of these candidates, if you were Murray and you had to pick out of these candidates, and I guess you'd have to assume Hunter would be in or not, but is there any one of these guys that you would say, Eddie, okay, this is the guy I'm going to go with for next season?
If I had a choice, I don't think I would have fired Bruce Boudreau in the first place.
Right.
I think I would have rather kept him around for another season and maybe saw who was available then.
Right.
But if I'm picking from the guys who are available right now, I've been a big fan of Travis Green since I've seen him become available and his success with Utica in the AHL, and I'm a big fan of the young coaches coming up. Of what I've seen from John Cooper since he's been up with the Tampa Bay Lightning. What I've seen from Jeff Blashill. I think it would be great for the Ducks to get a younger guy in there. But another option too that is probably a close second for me is I wouldn't mind seeing Paul MacLean take over, at least for one season. Again, maybe not really in an interim coach role, but you just sign him to say a 1 or 2 year contract, and you see how things work out, and maybe some other names become available at the end of next season.
And I agree with you partially. I think if I was Murray and I was in his shoes, I would go with the same two candidates as you, Eddie, but I would flop them. I think I would go with MacLean over Green. I know you're big on Green and the youth movement. For me, we've talked about it. It's a little bit of a risk. I think for me, too much. I'd rather stay internal in the organization, and I would go with Paul MacLean. But I do agree with you. I think if they were to go with him, I wouldn't sign him to a 4 or 5 year deal. I think you're right. You go with maybe a 1 or 2 year deal and see what happens in the next year or two. Like we said, Hitchcock's doing 1 more year at St. Louis. But that doesn't mean anything. Things change all the time. He could be available in a year. We also don't know. It just all depends on what happens next season. There could be other teams that perform poorly during the season, or maybe a first round exit or something like that. Another coach becomes available. But if I'm going by this limited pool of the people that we know that are out there for sure, that's the way I would go, Eddie. So similar to you, but I would go with the internal option first. If not, then I would go with probably Travis Green next. A lot of the stuff I've heard about Mike Yeo is not too great. Luke Richardson, like we talked about, there's been some red flags there with him not getting picked in Ottawa as the coach and the assistant coach. And Dale Hunter, we just don't know if he wants to do it or not. If he does, then that would kind of change my picks. Maybe I would like to have him up in there. But as far as the ones that we know that are in, that's the way I would go, Eddie. And I think that the Ducks, I don't really think there's many other options out there. I mean, is there anybody else out there you think that the Ducks could, try to pick up around the league or maybe in some of the minor leagues?
Sheldon Keefe was an interesting one from the Marlies. They had a successful season until they got bumped from the playoffs by the Hershey Bears a couple nights ago. He was one of the younger coaches that I mentioned earlier in an article that could be available. I haven't heard too much on that ever since they got bumped, and I'm sure the Leafs would like to keep him in their system, but with Babcock in place for this from maybe, up to possibly the next decade behind the Leafs bench. There's not much room to grow there, and he could be a possibility. But other than that, I mean, barring we've seen Mark Crawford and Guy Boucher both go to Ottawa, so there's only really the Ducks and the Flames looking for coaches right now. So other than the names that we've mentioned, unless something comes up, I think that's about it right now. And with the interviews ongoing, you would hope and expect a name to be announced soon. But I mean, we said that 2 weeks ago, and we're still waiting.
Yeah, and you were the one that brought that up too. You said in the last podcast, don't be surprised if we don't hear anything in the next couple of weeks. And here we are, Eddie. Nothing's happened in the next couple of weeks. We talked about the draft coming up, the free agency coming up, and mentioned how it could still go over into June. And I mean that's what we're going to see right now. I mean nothing's going to be decided in May, so maybe in June the decision gets made. Travis Green also is going into the running for Calgary as well, according to TSN. So he's going back and forth at least between those two teams as well. And that's really it that's out there. I don't really see too much else going on unless somebody out of left field comes. I mean, this is kind of what we have to work with. So if you go on the blog and you check the latest article we posted about Randy Carlyle talking with the Ducks today, if you go on there and you go on that article, all the names are listed of these coaches, and there's articles on there with analysis as to how we feel about if they're a good fit or not. So you can go on there and listen. And, if you haven't listened to the last podcast, please do, because in the last one, we do run down most of these candidates. Obviously we added in Dale Hunter, and then Randy Carlyle's name came up again officially. So we put those in there as well. And we'll just have to follow it and see what happens. I mean, I'd like to see someone picked by the next time we do the podcast, the next week or two, Eddie. But I think you hit the nail on the head. I think Murray's taken his time and not really making a rash decision. And right now, why not? I mean, we have the Stanley Cup Final going on, and after that, there's not too much happening. So, it's nerve-wracking. You want him to make a decision, but at the same time, I don't mind him, doing some homework on this.
Yeah, and you would think with the draft coming up near the end of June, and if he hasn't made a decision by the second week of June, you'd probably expect an announcement to come after the draft with that him and the management crew and everybody shifting gears to the draft and either maybe deciding, like we mentioned before, trying to move up in the draft. A lot of people are looking at Edmonton's pick for Matthew Tkachuk right now, or another player up near that top of the list. And we mentioned guys like Vatanen and Anderson who might be up for trade. So, if it will be a busy offseason for the Ducks, and if no coaching decision is made before the draft, and you might even have to wait until after the main first few weeks of free agency are done to hear a name be announced.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I think might happen. Might not come till either right before the draft or right after, Eddie. It kind of seems like what's going to happen, unless, like we said, this pool of coaches we see right now is what Murray's looking at, and he's going to make a decision. So, like we said, we'll keep you up to date as more news comes out. I'm watching it as things come up and putting it out there. So, with that, we'll kind of shift a little bit of gears here. There's been some other hockey still going on too, Eddie. The Worlds went on, and Corey Perry was the captain of Team Canada, and Team Canada ended up going all the way. They beat Team Finland for the gold 2-0, and Corey Perry became a triple gold member, which is only the third Duck to actually do it, behind Scott Niedermayer and Chris Pronger.
Yeah, and it was actually a really good tournament to watch. We watched arguably the two best teams. Finland was undefeated into going into that game, and Canada had only lost the one game to Finland 4-0. So arguably the best two teams of the tournament faced off, and
it was a really close game. I mean, Canada opened the scoring with Connor McDavid getting his first goal of the tournament, which was obviously a good time to get his first goal. And they sealed it late with an empty net goal and just played an all around a good game. I mean, it was the team everybody expected to win the tournament with a team full of NHLers. You would expect them. Finland surprised a lot of people with a really young roster and was able to go far, but. It was a good game, a good tournament to watch. Perry obviously joins the Triple Gold Club. I believe he joined Scott Niedermayer too as the only player ever to win the Memorial Cup, World Junior Gold, World Championship Gold, the Olympics, and the Stanley Cup. So I mean I mean pretty much everywhere Perry and Niedermayer have gone, they've won everywhere they've gone. So that's a great achievement for him. But on the back end of that too, he was also left off the World Cup roster after having a pretty decent tournament, scoring 9 points in 10 games.
Yeah, and that's coming up next. We're going to see, the World Cup of Hockey come up here in September. It's going to start on September 17th, and depending on how the final series plays out, it'll go either through the 29th of September or that Saturday there on October 1st. So that's how that's going to play out. What did you think about Perry not making Team Canada? Obviously Getzlaf's on there. I've heard, different things. Obviously some of the fans are still upset with the way Perry played against Nashville in the playoffs this year, and they're asking, where was Perry? Because here he is, he gets 9 points in 10 games against Team Canada, and then he doesn't even get, one goal in 7 games against Nashville. So, what do you think? Do you think it's the way he played in the NHL, or do you think that Team Canada is just loaded, or what's the deal, Eddie?
I think it's kind of a mix of both. I think he's obviously one of the top right wingers in hockey, and it's just that you look at the buildup of the team. They've got superstars, and obviously Crosby and Taves and Stamkos and Giroux and Tavares. I mean, the team itself is stacked, and then you work your way down through the lineup, and you've got a couple guys on there like Duchesne and Marchand, who was a surprise selection to the team. And you think they would, when you look at the buildup of the team, they're picking the obvious guys, and then from there they're just kind of getting some speedier guys who obviously still have some skill, and it looks like they're going to go with speed on the open ice, and that's something that Marchand brings to the game over Perry. Marchand had a great season this year too. He scored in the 30s for goals this year, and he had a great World Championship. So I think he earned that spot over Perry, and I think that's just what they're going for. I think they're going for a little bit more speed on this team. Obviously putting Duchesne on, who had a good World Championships as well, and I'm surprised, but at the same time I'm not surprised when you actually look up the lineup for Perry being left off. I mean, really, the only two slow guys on that lineup are Getzlaf and Thornton. So, in the end, it is disappointing for Ducks fans, but it's not a huge surprise. Like, for example, Kessel being left off Team USA.
Yeah, speaking of other players being left off, we saw Jakob Silfverberg get put on Team Sweden, but then we saw Raquel and Lindholm get left off of that, which some people thought at least one of them would make it, and we see that both of them didn't make Team Sweden. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that was a surprise too, as well, or no?
I think more so Raquel over Lindholm. I mean, Sweden's blue line is pretty stacked. You've got guys like Hedman, Ekman Larsson, and Erik Karlsson as the front three for that, and you've got Jarmelson and Anton Strawman and Nicholas Kronwall on there. So it's a really tough D to crack, and Mattias Ekholm rounded out that bottom. So, it would have been really hard for him to make the team. I think maybe he could have made it over Ekholm, but Ekholm had a really good playoffs with Nashville. So I think he earned the right to be that seventh man on that blue line. But, more so for Raquel, obviously Silfverberg ended up making the team. And that was good for him, and he had a good season. But I think Raquel, he might have deserved a spot. It's still a hard line to crack. You've got some great forwards on that team too, but it's disappointing to see him make it. I think we would have put some money on seeing at least one of them on the team.
Yeah, I agree. I thought at least one of the two would have made it, but like you said, I mean, some of these teams, they're really loaded. So it's going to be a fun tournament. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. The other Ducks players that have made it, Ryan Kessler's on Team USA, Sammy Vatanen's on Team Finland, Frederick Anderson on Team Europe, and then you have John Gibson on Team North America. And, explain this to me, Eddie. Some people ask me this question. What's the deal with Team USA and Team North America? Why are there two like that? And, obviously we already have Team Canada, but what's the deal? Why is there a Team North America? People are asking, wanting to know what's the deal with this.
Yeah, so it's kind of a poorly named team when you have Team Canada, then Team USA, and then you have Team North America, which obviously is Canada and USA. So Team North America is essentially team, I believe it's under 22 or under 23, but that's essentially what it is. You've got all the younger players. You've got McDavid and Eichel and Larkin. So all the under 22s or under 23s from Canada and North America, or Canada and the US, and they just called it Team North America instead of calling it like Team Young Guns or something corny like that, and just keep it within the country. And obviously they're calling the other one Team Europe, but that is Team Europe is actually all of the other European countries that don't have a team. So I believe Russia has a team, I believe Finland has a team, Sweden has a team, and then say Kopitar. And Kopitar will be on Team Europe. So he's from Slovenia, I believe, and then Anderson, who's from Denmark, which is a country that doesn't have its own team, will be on Team Europe as well. So they kind of take all those smaller countries and blend them into one team to make them competitive. So obviously, a team on its own, like Slovenia, only really has Kopitar, and when you watch them, say, at the World Championships or at the Olympics, they might squeak out a game against a weaker opponent or play a tougher team pretty close, but all in all, they really have no shot at winning the tournament. But when you put all those smaller countries together, it makes it a little bit more competitive, and at least all the teams will actually be able to compete. So you can't really, at the bat, will say Canada's a slight favorite, but you wouldn't be surprised if Team Europe came out and won the tournament.
Yeah, and speaking of that, what do you think? I really think Team Canada is going to, at least be in the final, if not win this, based upon what I'm seeing. But, some of these other teams are pretty competitive. What are your thoughts? Do you think Team Canada goes all the way in this tournament, or do you think someone else is going to be a surprise and win this one?
I think Team Canada definitely has to be the favorite. I mean, you've got arguably the best player in the game is Sidney Crosby. You've got Stamkos, Tavares, Taves, Giroux, Getzlaf. I mean, the forwards on that team are great. The defense, you've got Brent Burns, who's had a great season. Shea Weber, Drew Doughty, Jake Muzzin, and then in goal you have maybe the two best goalies in the world right now, and Braden Holtby and Carey Price, and then to round off the three you have a not so bad goalie in Corey Crawford. So I think they have to be the favorite. I mean, usually they are in every tournament they go into. I think the U.S. is a lot better team this year than they've been in the past. And I think you can't really sleep on that North American team too. They have a lot of good young players, and obviously McDavid and Eichel and Larkin, and even Austin Matthews, who's going to be most likely the first pick this year in the draft. They're going to be a scary team to face, and they've got Matt Murray and John Gibson in goal, who are no slouches in the NHL either this season. Obviously, Gibson had a great year for Anaheim, and Matt Murray's leading the Penguins into possibly to a Stanley Cup right now. So they're going to be a fun team to watch. And you also got to look at Finland too, and they've had a great year internationally for hockey. They won the under-18s. They won the World Championship. They made it to the final in the World Championships, and now they're bringing some of those guys in. I believe Laine made the team. I don't know if Aho made the team, a couple 18-year-olds, but they're going to bring in all, obviously Mata and Vatanen and Ristolainen to that team, and Rene and Rask in goal. So I think they're going to be a really good team too. So I think those are definitely the favorites. But the good thing about this tournament is really anybody could win it. I mean, every team is full of NHLers. There's a star power on each team, so it's going to be a really fun tournament to watch, and a little bit different from what we've seen in other international tournaments.
Yeah, I agree. I'm excited to see this, because it's basically like hockey starting sooner. So we're going to see. It's not the NHL, but pretty close to it. And it's going to start on Saturday, September 17th, and it's going to go through the end of September, maybe the first day of October, depending on how the final plays out in this, which is a 3-game final. So, stay tuned for that. Obviously, it's summertime now. We're going to be looking at the draft and possible free agency and some trades and some things like that going on. But that's on the horizon, so that's coming up. And right now, you mentioned some of the players, Burns and Murray and whatnot. We've got the Sharks against Pittsburgh. In the Stanley Cup Final, we were half right, Eddie. We thought it would be the Blues, but instead it ended up being the Sharks, and we had picked Pittsburgh. But these series were interesting series. I mean, Pittsburgh was down 3-2, and ended up pulling that one out, Eddie. I mean, we talked about it. We thought the series would go far, but I really didn't think it would go 7 games. I thought Pittsburgh might have finished it in 6, but as a lot of people know, I'm a big fan of Pittsburgh too. So I was happy to see them do it. What are your thoughts on that Eastern Conference Final?
Yeah, when I was first going into it, I thought Pittsburgh was going to pull it out maybe 6 games. I didn't think any team would win in 5, but I think they were going to get it done before 7. But I mean, Tampa Bay overcame a really big scare with Ben Bishop a couple games under Vasilevsky. I mean, I think Vasilevsky played the rest of the series. I didn't catch a lot
Yes.
of the games, but I mean, he played great. Which is actually concerning for them now. They're in a similar situation to where the Ducks are in, but Drouin stepped up. Tyler Johnson, Nikita Kucherov, they played well again, and they had no Stamkos, they had no Bishop and no Strawman for part of the series there, and really it was surprising, and they've obviously been surprising this whole playoffs, and being able to go this far without Stamkos, and then being able to take Pittsburgh to 7 games without Ben Bishop. It was a real surprising thing to see, and I think a good thing for Tampa Bay, and it really in their future is possibly without Stamkos, and seeing how far they could go with the team that they have right now, and not really needing Stamkos. I mean, the only game he comes in, and he's probably not 100% in that game either, but they do
Right.
lose that game when he comes back, and I think with the way things are going, he's obviously said he wants to stay in Tampa Bay, but I think it's a little bit late for that now. No contract's been signed. They're not going to shell out as much money as other teams, say Toronto or Montreal or Detroit, will to get a guy like Steven Stamkos. So I think that was his last game in Tampa Bay. But all kudos to the Penguins. I mean, they've been great all playoffs. They've played some great goalies. They've played amazing hockey. They've been led by, I mean, surprising. No surprise in being led by Kessel and Crosby, but Bonino has been great for them. So is Carl Hagelin. Bonino actually has 16 points, so he's tied with Sid right now for second. And Kessel leading the way with 18 points. So, and them having Matt Murray, a rookie in net, it's been a really good run for them. And they stole game 1 the other day against the Sharks, so they're on their way right now to winning a Stanley Cup.
Yeah, a couple things that were interesting to me in that Eastern Conference Final. I really thought when Stamkos played in Game 7, I don't want a Monday morning quarterback or whatever, but I didn't think that he was 100%. And when he, only played, I think it was 13 or 14 minutes in that 7th game, and seeing the way he was out there, I mean, he didn't even play a lot in the first and the second period. I mean, he played mostly in the third because they were trailing, trying to come back. But I didn't really agree with that move. I know they only lost by 1 goal, but I mean, Stamkos didn't really have to. I mean, he had a breakaway chance in that game, but he wasn't 100%. I don't know if it would have been different if he didn't play. Because who impressed me the most in that series specifically was Drouin, Eddie. I mean, that guy was flying all over the place. There were a couple times that he just took it all the way to the house and scored. I mean, so if they're going to lose Stamkos like you're talking about, which is a real possibility. Getting 1 game away from the Stanley Cup Final without your starting goalie, without a couple other key players too as well. I mean, I think they're going to be back up there next year, and we talked about this too back during the trade deadline. We talked about the Ducks trying to get Drouin, and would it be too much? And I mean, I'm not saying that we should have got him because it probably would have been too much. But man, if the Ducks would have had him in the playoffs, I'm not saying it'd be the Ducks against the Penguins right now, but I think the Ducks might have gotten at least a little farther.
Yeah, and it'll be key for Tampa Bay to bring a guy like Drouin back, and it looks like actually he'll stay, and Stamkos is more likely to go now, which is, I mean, something we'd be a little bit more surprised to say way back by the trade deadline. But
Hmm.
it'll be big for them to keep him, and obviously, like you said, them making it that far without Bishop, without Stamkos, bodes well for their future. And if you see a guy like Stamkos go, it opens up some space for them next year to or at the free agency to add maybe a guy like Kyle Okposo who's going to be available, or some of the other UFAs who are available, like say a Louis Eriksson or something like that, and add some more top 6 scoring. So you don't really replace a guy like Steven Stamkos, but you add a little bit more scoring to that team, and yeah, they'll definitely be they'll be back into the playoffs next year, and back near the top of the Eastern Conference.
Now, shifting gears, going over to the Western Conference, we saw San Jose take out St. Louis in 6 games. And they really took it to St. Louis in this, Eddie. I mean, you and I talked about it. We thought the Blues would win. We thought it would go 7 games. This one ended up going 6 instead, and San Jose won. What did you think was the key for San Jose, knocking off St. Louis?
I mean, they just scored goals the whole playoffs.
Yeah.
They've just scored goals, and they've played some great hockey. They've had a great power play, and their key guys stepped up, and where St. Louis didn't. I mean, Tarasenko fell asleep in that series, and I think that was a big issue for St. Louis. He was been great up until that series, and then he kind of just fell asleep and didn't really get anything going, I guess, until the last game. And you had Couture firing all cylinders. You had Pavelski, Burns, Thornton, and Marlowe. Even they were all playing at their best hockey, and I think that's why San Jose ended up pulling this out. I think I was surprised to see them win it in 6. I think they played a good enough hockey that they definitely could have won it earlier. But I think in the end it really comes down to St. Louis's key players not showing up, and especially the blame mostly rides on Tarasenko for that.
Yeah, I agree. I really think that the offense for San Jose is what did it. The power play has been just ridiculous. I think it's when they started the Stanley Cup Final, it was around 27-something%, which is obviously very, very good. And that was really the key. And the Blues didn't really show up, especially towards the end of the series. I mean, especially in Game 6. I mean, they just weren't there. I mean, San Jose just took them out. I mean, plain and simple. They just wanted it more. And it's interesting because by the way the 2 series went, Eddie, each conference final series, many people out there saying that San Jose is going to win the Stanley Cup Final. Based upon those, and I think we're in the minority. I think it's you, me, and I saw Phil Hewlett too also say that he thinks Pittsburgh is going to win. I think everybody else from the Register and the Times and all these other, obviously the National Hockey News too as well, a majority is picking the Sharks. But I don't see it that way. I mean, I watched Game 1. Obviously, Pittsburgh, dominated in the first period. Sharks come back, they dominate in the second period. And then lo and behold, Bones pulls out the game winner in the 2 minutes and change, whatever that was left in the game. But I know the series is going to be a close series. It's definitely going to go, I would say, at least 6 games. But I still think the Penguins pull this one out, Eddie. I think the biggest difference in this series is really the speed of the Penguins. I mean, you look at the Sharks, don't get me wrong. They score a lot of goals. They're phenomenal on the power play. They beat up other teams. But some of these other teams that they beat up aren't necessarily as fast, as Pittsburgh. I mean, yeah, they beat the Kings, but the Kings weren't as fast this year. Yes, they beat Nashville. They beat the Blues, who are probably maybe a little bit more faster, but they still had some, slower guys on there too. I just think that the key in this series, if Pittsburgh's going to win, one, it's going to be a battle of the goalies, Murray and Jones, which we saw that. Jones kept the Sharks in it in that first period. Because, I mean, Pittsburgh could have been up 3 or 4-0 in that first period. Let's not kid yourselves. They were just so dominant in that first period. And then you see the role reversal, and you see Murray. He gives up a couple of goals in the second period, but he keeps Pittsburgh in it, and they keep it tied. So I think the goalie battle is a big thing here. Obviously, the special teams is big because the Sharks have been so dominant in the power play. But I think overall the team speed is what Pittsburgh has to focus on. And if they play like they did in the first and the third period, I think they win this series, Eddie. I mean, obviously, it's not going to be easy. The Sharks are no slouch. But it's just interesting to see so many people picking San Jose like they're going to blow the doors off Pittsburgh. And I don't know if they're not watching the Eastern Conference Final and the other playoffs, because I've been watching – especially after the Ducks were gone, I've been watching almost every series, as many games as I can from the second round on. And I like what I see in Pittsburgh. I really do. And I think they're going to do it, Eddie. Those are just my thoughts. What do you think as far as the keys in this series and, whether or not San Jose or Pittsburgh prevails and why?
I think the key is definitely the speed. I mean, both teams have a great power play, and limiting your trips to the penalty box for either team is going to be important, and I think that will be definitely a key in this series. I mean, whoever makes the trips to the penalty box more is really going to be the team that pays the most. But it might be a weird thing to say, but I think San Jose should win the series, but I think Pittsburgh will win the series. And I think with the amount of goals San Jose has been scoring, I think they should, especially against a rookie goalie in Matt Murray. But I just think the way Pittsburgh's been playing, like you said, the speed they play the game at, with everybody clicking. I mean, not just Crosby and Malkin. Kessel's been great for them. Bonino, Hagelin have been good, but also Brian Rust and Connor Sheary, who grabbed the first 2 goals in the last game. Bonino scoring the game winner. I think everybody is playing well for them throughout the whole lineup. And that's not to say that isn't happening in San Jose, but I think if Pittsburgh can keep that up, they'll win this, and it will still go long. I think 6 or 7 for sure. But if Pittsburgh wins this next game coming up tomorrow, I mean, San Jose's in a tough hole. They found out how to win at home in the playoffs, which they struggled with during the season. But they're going to have 2 really important games where they're going to have to win both to even up that series if they can't win tomorrow.
Yeah, that brings us to one fan question we had too. Katrina brings up this, about the rosters for Pittsburgh, which obviously, majority of our audience is Ducks fans, so you guys know. But this Pittsburgh team has got Bonito on it, Hagelin, Lovejoy, Kunitz, and then of course Cullen. For maybe some of the younger fans don't remember, but the people that have been around know that Cullen too was on the Ducks a while back, along with Kunitz, and she just asks our thoughts on this. And I mean, I liked Pittsburgh before the Ducks even existed. I've mentioned that before with Lemieux and Yager back in, Yager in the late 80s and Lemieux came in 1990. But I do like seeing these 5 guys on there. I mean, I think it is kind of interesting that, some people brought up the issue of Hagelin and Lovejoy, because, Hagelin was on the Ducks in the beginning of the season. Obviously Lovejoy was last season, got traded for Dupree, and now we see all of this unfold. And so, how happy are they? I mean, they were on a team that they thought was going to, be in the Stanley Cup Final, and then they get traded. Now they're on the team that is in the final. So, I mean, it's just a weird twist of fate. But I definitely rooting for those guys in Pittsburgh, Eddie. I know some fans are rooting for San Jose because they're like, hey, let's keep the cup in California. And I guess, I mean, if that's what you want to do, but if the Ducks were in the Stanley Cup again, I really don't think the Shark fans would root for us. So, I mean, that's just my take. I mean, nothing against San Jose. If they win, then I'm happy for them too and great. But I'm not really going to pull for them. I'm going for Pittsburgh, especially because it's got 5 ex-Ducks on there.
Yeah, listen, if you're a Ducks fan, and that's not to say anything, but you should not be cheering for the San Jose Sharks. You should almost hate them as much, if not at the same that you hate the LA Kings. I mean, come on. I mean, we all hate the Kings. I haven't met a Ducks fan who likes both the Ducks and the Kings. And really, the rivalry is almost the same between the Ducks and the Sharks. And I get that a lot of people hate Sidney Crosby, but I think you gotta hate the Sharks more than you hate Sidney Crosby. I mean, if the Sharks win a cup, there's no difference between the Ducks and the Sharks. We both have 1 cup. The Kings have 2. I mean, right now the Sharks don't have a cup. So if Pittsburgh can win this, the Sharks still don't have a cup. And they don't have, their window's closing too. They don't have a lot of young guys coming up to replace it, other than really Timo Meier and obviously Couture and some of the guys who are there too. If the Sharks win the cup, like you said, there's only one player I'm going to be happy for. That's Chris Tierney. He's a former London Knight. That's literally the only guy I'll be happy for. Maybe a little bit for Joe Thornton. He is from my hometown, so I might be a little bit happy for him. But I would definitely like to see the Penguins win. Obviously, I think as a Ducks fan, I would not want to see the Sharks win the cup and draw even with us in Stanley Cups. I'm rooting for obviously the former Ducks that you said that are on the team in Lovejoy, Hagelin, Bonino, Cullen. So it'd be nice to see them win. And just a word to the wise for a lot of the Ducks fans out there that come on guys, it's the Sharks. We can't really be cheering for them to win the Stanley Cup.
Well, and the other thing too is it happened after the Kings won their first one and the second one. Whenever the Ducks would play the Kings at Honda Center, their fans would even be more rowdy and talk even more trash about, oh, we won a cup, and then now it's 2-1, 2-1. That's all I ever hear from Kings fans when I talk to them. Other than a few, I do have a few friends that are Kings fans that are hockey fans that are cool people, but the random ones I run into at the game, it's like that's all I ever hear, and I'm like, okay guys, really, I know you can do 5th grade math. I hope your teacher's proud of you, okay, but think about it this way: the Sharks win. Do you think that their fans are going to come down and not going to say something about that to us too? And yeah, we can sit there and say we won it first, but now they have one too. So you just got to think about that. You're going to be listening to them talking trash when they come to Honda Center next season, because that's what happens. Opposing fans like to come to Honda Center and rile us up from not all the teams, but there's certain teams: Chicago, Detroit, LA, San Jose, there's certain fans from, those teams. You guys know what I'm talking about. They show up, not all of them, but, there's a good chance that they will show up and say some trash talk. But, one interesting thing about San Jose and the Ducks, kind of a parallel, Eddie. San Jose won the Pacific Division 4 years in a row. They didn't make it to the Stanley Cup. They got to the conference final 2009 and 10 season, and then the 2010-2011 season. And then the Ducks now are on the back end of doing the same thing. The Ducks have now played, 4 years in a row, winning the Pacific Division. They got to the conference final once out of those 4 years, and they didn't make it. So it's kind of an interesting thing that the Ducks are kind of where they were at then. And, back then, because there's this discussion about the captaincy and obviously, Perry and Getzlaf have been getting a lot of heat. It's kind of interesting to see what's going to happen when the Ducks do, get this coach figured out and see what he decides to do, because, they took away the C from Thornton. They changed it around. They didn't have anybody for a year. They picked captain. They redo it, and they end up winning. I mean, obviously, it's a few seasons down the road. But the only reason why I really mention this is because it's something to keep your eye open for. I wouldn't be surprised, and Eddie, you probably agree with me, depending on the coach, I wouldn't be surprised if some of the A's and the C's might get changed come this next season. If they stay the same, they stay the same. But I really think that some of those, should be changed around. Specifically Perry, in my opinion. I really don't think he should wear the A. I think it should be given to someone like Andrew Cogliano. He should have it. And, there's been a lot of talk. A lot of people think Kessler should have the C. So, those are some things, I don't know, just they may come up, Eddie. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, like it's an eerily similar situation, like you said, to the San Jose Sharks in from '07 to 2011, and winning the 4 straight Pacific Division titles and failing to reach the Stanley Cup Final and yada yada yada. We've heard it for the last 4 seasons in Anaheim and the Game 7s and everything like that. And now with the questioning the leadership in the locker room, it's all pretty much the same situation. So. Like we mentioned this before, and we said it depends on the coach who comes in. We wouldn't be surprised to see them just go down to 3 assistant captains or alternate captains and have 3 of them for the next season, or completely switched around and having a new captain, let's say Kessler or Perry or Cogliano or whoever the coach ends up wanting. Or we could see them go in with the same setup like this next season and see how that works with the new coach and let him decide throughout the season who he thinks should be the captain, and then it could be changed at the end of the season. I mean, right now all options are open. We obviously still have to wait and see who the coach is going to be before any of those decisions are made. But it is a really similar situation to the Sharks, and like you, I wouldn't be surprised if the C gets switched around or we go down to 3 alternate captains for next season.
Yeah, it's just something to keep, put in the back of your mind. Obviously, right now, that's probably a couple months away, before we hear about it. I mean, obviously, there's been some discussions. I see some people in the groups talking about it. I mean, a lot of it came up, obviously, right after the Ducks got knocked out by Nashville. A lot of people were, pissed off, for lack of a better term, and I totally get it. I mean, I was not happy when the Ducks lost to Nashville either. I mean, we all thought we were going to win and go to the second round and most likely get to the Western Conference Final again, at least. But, I'm not going to bring up old wounds, I guess, so to speak. But just saying, going forward, I think that's something that we're going to have to see. First off, if a coach gets picked around the draft, get the draft finalized, and then it'll be interesting. See what happens come, September, and then obviously October when the season starts, and go from there. Other than that, I mean, there's really not too much that's going to happen other than the free agency, which will come up at the end of June, July. We already know, I mean, we've kind of beat this to a dead horse too, Eddie. We know that some of the players aren't going to come back. We've kind of, shared our thoughts on who we like to have and whatnot. And, nothing's really changed on that. We hope that the Ducks keep Lindholm and Raquel. Some of the other names that we mentioned in the UFA land is Perron and McGinn. And then, we've talked about this and posted some articles on it too, is the goalie situation, which, that may come up around the draft time too. We're going to have to see what the Ducks do, because I think, next to making a decision at coach, Eddie, I think probably the next biggest decision is who the Ducks really want to go with in net. If the Ducks try to keep both, then, if they want to spend the money and they're able to do it, I don't know exactly what Anderson wants, but I mean, you have to think that he's at least worth $3 million at least this season. I mean, and I think that that's a fair, if he asks for that, that's a fair amount. So it's going to be interesting. I just don't see the Ducks taking both, Eddie. So if I'm Murray right now, I don't want to be in his shoes. I don't want to make this coaching decision. I don't like all the options out there necessarily, other than, we talked about some of them earlier. But the goalie situation, too, it's a tough one. Do you go with Anderson? Do you go with Gibson? I don't know, Eddie. Your thoughts on the free agency and the goalie situation?
Yeah, I think you have to move one of them before the start of next season. I mean, there's going to be a decision on the expansion process by the end of June. Most likely, it's going to go in for the 2017-2018 season, which means the expansion draft will happen next year's draft, which means you can't protect both goalies. And this is almost a certain thing now. I don't think you bank on it not being a certain thing at this point. I think if this decision comes before June and we hear that, yes, there is going to be an expansion draft, and yes, you can only protect one of your goalies, then we'll see one of them moved at the draft. And I think it's not a bad thing for the Ducks to do this. I think we have to move away from having a 1A and a 1B. I think you have to pick your guy, and they either pick Freddie or they pick Gibson, and they decide which way they're going to go in the future, and that gives you a pretty good trade piece to move on. Either you don't sign Freddie and you move him as an RFA, which still gives you it will get you a good return. Or you move Gibson, who's under a really good contract for the next 2 years as a young goalie, and he'll get you a great return as well. And I mean, there's a lot of teams looking for goalies as well. I think it's a great opportunity for the Ducks to move up in the draft. Obviously, Calgary is a team that's going to be looking for a goalie. It's not the best trading partner, obviously being in the Pacific Division, but they do hold the 6th overall pick right now. The Ducks are in need of some young forwards to stock up the prospect pool, so that's an option for them. And I think the other big decision, other than the coach and the goalies, is deciding if you're going to keep Sami Vatanen or not. And that's something we've talked about a lot over the last few podcasts. And I know I wrote about it too, and the possibility of the Sami Vatanen being packaged in a deal for Edmonton for the 4th overall pick, and being able to pick up a guy like Pierre-Luc Dubois or Matthew Tkachuk from the London Knights. So I think that's definitely an option for the Ducks, and really those are the three main things we'll see get done either at the draft or before the draft. So I think if you don't have any hockey to watch, you don't have anything to watch, definitely keep an eye on the first round of the draft, because the Ducks are definitely going to be one of the busier teams.
Yeah, and I think we've all come to expect that, Eddie, with Murray. I mean, he's always busy. He's busy on the draft day. He's busy around the trade deadline. Obviously, he's doing all this coaching stuff now. I'm sure he's done enough of the self-assessment of all the players. And what he'll do usually, I'm not in his head, and it's hard to get there because he keeps a lot of things close to his chest. But we do know that he's going to go through and prioritize these players. He's going to go through and look at how the season went down, and amongst these RFAs and UFAs, he's going to look at them. He's going to do the math. Obviously, the goalie situation, Vatanen, as you said too, is a huge piece of this. Forgot to mention before you did. And he's going to rank them, and that's what he does. He's mentioned it before in postseasons that he goes through and he has a priority list, and he starts talking to people based upon their priority list. So he's going to go down that list. He's got certain numbers in his head for certain players. He's going to try to get those players, and hopefully, things come together with the ones that he wants. I mean, we assume, we don't know for sure, but like we said, Lindholm and Raquel obviously are up on that list. Vatanen is kind of a wobbler. We don't know. Could be, stay or go, depending on what Vatanen wants. And we've seen the issue, too, of the length of contracts, too, come up as an issue. That's why Bolesky and Boschman were gone. I mean, it came down to one more year for each of them, unfortunately. So I just hope that doesn't happen again, Eddie. I hope that we don't let Raquel or Lindholm go because they want one more year and we don't give them that one more year. I mean, granted, I don't think they're going to be 5 or 6 year deals, but if we can sign them and say Murray wants a 2-year deal and they want a 3-year deal, I hope the Ducks do, and Murray keeps some of those key guys, because to me, Raquel or Lindholm are certainly worth, an extra year if the price isn't too crazy.
Yeah, I think it's a different situation with them compared to Bolesky and Boschman, them being a little bit older, being UFAs. Possibly you don't want to bank on them having another successful season, but with Lindholm and Raquel, they're young guys. They're in their early 20s. I think I don't think they're going to argue over a year or two. Obviously, they'll work on the contract for as long as they can. I mean, remember last year and how long it took for some of these deals, for Silfverberg's deal to get done last year. So, I don't expect a decision to be made earlier. I'm sure he set that aside for later on in after the draft and maybe even after free agency because, they are RFAs. You do have time to deal with them. I'm sure he's talked to them. I'm sure they have a starting point and their agents have worked out some sort of starting point for the player and the general manager. And I would be surprised to not see them both back with the Ducks next year. And even if you do want to move on, you do have the option to trade them. You don't lose them for nothing, and you will get something in return. But I would be very very surprised to see the Ducks go that route with either player.
Yeah, I agree. I think those are the ones, at least the top two that they would, want to keep, especially amongst the RFAs. So that's what you have to look at on the horizon. Basically, the coaching is still up in the air, unfortunately. Hopefully, we get an answer here soon. You still have the Stanley Cup Final to watch. Obviously, Game 1 is in the books. Pittsburgh winning that one 3-2. So there's still plenty. There'll be at least 3 more games. We assume probably 4 or 5. It's going to be a heck of a series. I mean, the first game was excellent. So it was fun to watch. Whether you're rooting for either team, I mean, we'll see who wins that, and then the draft will come up here in June and the free agency, and we'll be back obviously to report on those things. We'll see if we're back in a week or in 2 weeks. It really just depends on kind of what's happening. I am not going anywhere. I'm actually engaged in studying for the bar the next 2 months, so I don't have any plans to go anywhere, Eddie. I've been reading a lot of law for the the last couple of weeks. Very exciting, but I've been catching the games in between, taking some breaks. So that's where we're at, and we'll see you guys hopefully in a week or two whenever some news comes up. Otherwise, it'll be on the blog. Check it out, and we'll see you soon. Let's go Ducks.